Hi there, welcome to DIY Comics FAQ. I'm GE Gallas and I'm here to answer all your questions about indie comics, graphic novels, webcomics, zines, self-publishing, storytelling, you name it. If you like my videos, don't forget to subscribe. Today I'm answering a question from Roan at Roans_ on Twitter. They ask, what is the best way to organize ideas for storytelling? I have been working on my own comic, but it is difficult for me to capture my ideas and have them received directly by the public. I actually asked them a further question. So I said, are we talking about organizing ideas before making a script? And they replied, yes, exactly. I'm currently writing, but even having the idea in mind, I don't know how to put them in a way the story progresses. I feel stuck in some points. So if you haven't already, please go back and watch my episode about outlining. In that episode, I explained a bunch of different tips and techniques to organize your story, about the hamburger model, and I talked about the hero's journey, which is from Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces, as well as Vicky King, How to Write a Movie in 21 Days. So I go into a lot of detail about these two books in my outlining episode, so I'll put a link below in the description so you can easily find that video for even more helpful advice about this topic. Also, I would suggest going back and watching my Seed of an Idea episode, as well as my Introduction to Script Writing episode. Again, I'll put links to those episodes in the description below so you can find them easily. But I'm going to introduce a bunch of new tips and ideas in this video as well, so stay tuned. So I'm going to talk a little bit about organizing your ideas. So you might already have the seed of an idea. You have that small idea that you want to nurture into a full story, into a complex plot, into a full-length indie comic or graphic novel or webcomic, but you're not sure where to go from there. So you have the seed of the idea, and you might have a couple notes, a couple ideas of how you want your story to go. My suggestion is that at this stage you should try brainstorming. Brainstorming is a great way to further develop your story without putting the pressure on yourself to make a perfect story. So you're really just writing down, throwing out there different ideas that you can rearrange, cut, add to later. So it doesn't have to be a perfectly wrapped present. It can just be a bunch of different puzzle pieces that you're going to work with and put together into a finished puzzle later, into a finished story. So when you're brainstorming, there are no good ideas or bad ideas at this stage. You're just trying to get your ideas out there, try to get them down on paper, whatever comes to mind. Don't try to edit yourself, don't try to censor yourself. Just use something that's easy for you, like a notebook, a separate piece of paper, a Word document, whatever works for you, and just write down whatever you might be thinking. Even add some research if there's a specific topic you're interested in. Maybe you want to look at Wikipedia and get some other ideas. Wikipedia shouldn't be your main source of research, but it's not a bad idea to start with Wikipedia to kind of figure out where you should go from there. It's a good starting point to further develop your research. So when you're brainstorming, think of it as free writing. So don't restrain yourself. Just write down whatever pops into your head. You can get rid of bad ideas later. Just you're trying to get things down on paper so you don't forget them later. So don't worry about editing, just write. It's not going to be a perfect thing. It's just going to be a tool for you to use to later shape into your outline and your script and your story. This can be in whatever format works for you. You might want to make lists. You might want to make a map where you write different ideas in different bubbles and connect them with arrows. I talked in a previous video about using flashcards or sticky notes, for one idea to a flashcard, one idea to a sticky note, and then you can easily rearrange them so you can get a better sense of what goes where. So when you're brainstorming, don't worry about the plot, don't worry about the order of the plot at this stage. That's why it's great to use flashcards or sticky notes so you can rearrange it later and help you figure out the order of events in your plot. Some of the things you might want to consider when you're brainstorming: the basic premise, the theme, the style, genre, tone of the story, your protagonist's main character, your antagonist, supporting characters, the length that you want to make this comic or graphic novel. Is it going to be one volume? Is it going to be 100 pages? Is it going to be a webcomic that goes on for years? And the beginning, middle, and ends. Basically, you should be thinking about the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your story. Those are just a few things to consider to help you with your brainstorming, but your brainstorming is whatever you want it to be. It's obviously not a finished product. It's just a tool to help you get from the seed of an idea towards your finished comic. I just wanted to show you, here are some notes that I took while I was writing my graphic novel trilogy, The Poet and the Flea, about the poet painter William Blake. So I just basically wrote a list in a document on my computer, and this was really helpful for me. As you can see, I highlighted in different colors. I color-coded my notes to help me while I was writing my script. So the yellow highlighting was for things that were important that I didn't want to forget. And then the gray was for notes that I already put into my script, so I knew I didn't have to go back over that. So it's kind of just helping me sift through my notes. Color coding is really helpful in that way, so maybe writing it in a document on your computer might be helpful to you. But definitely I write a lot of notes by hand too, and I write a lot of notes on my cell phone when I don't have a piece of paper. So I really just write down notes as I go along, and whatever it happens to be, a piece of paper or a computer or whatever I have available is where I'll write my notes. Don't think that there's a right or wrong way of writing your notes. It's whatever works for you. So Roan asked how to put their ideas in a way that allows the story to progress. Again, I talked about this in my outlining video. You can use the hamburger model. You can use Hero with 1,000 Faces, the Universal Hero's Journey. You can use Vicky King, How to Write a Screenplay, How to Write a Movie in 21 Days. These are all basically the same thing, but said in a different way, the same form of storytelling, but put in different terms. They really all have the same ideas, but just it's helpful to think about those ideas in more than one way. So I'm going to explore the same ideas but in a different way through the 3-act structure. So the 3-act structure, as it says in its name, is just breaking down your story into 3 acts. This is, of course, beginning, middle, and ends, like I've discussed in a number of my videos, but it's another way to approach your storytelling. So maybe this is a good way for you to organize your ideas and to make sure that the events in your story are building up to a climax and then resolution. So here's one representation of the 3-act structure. You can see it's just a flat line, but it shows you Act 1 is the setup, the inciting incident. Act 2 is the confrontation / midpoint. And Act 3 is the climax and resolution. You can also think of the 3-act structure in this way. So it's not a straight line, it's more like a triangle or a pyramid, however you want to think of that. So you have the rising action, the climax, and the falling action. So that rising action is going to be most of your story when everything's building to the climax. And your falling action is going to be pretty short. It doesn't take long to get from the climax to the resolution. That's why I don't find this way of thinking about it as helpful. The falling action should actually be much shorter than the rising action. But if this is helpful to you to think about it this way, then definitely use this. So let's go into more detail about the different acts. So Act 1 is the beginning. It's the setup, it's the introduction to whatever incident that's going to occur. You're introducing the conflict, you're introducing the catalyst, you're introducing the main character and the main character's motivation. The catalyst is whatever causes your main character or your protagonist to act. It's whatever makes your protagonist take action. So again, Act 1 is the beginning. You're setting up the plot, you're introducing the characters to your audience, you're introducing the situation to your audience. You really need to make sure that you set everything up in a way that your audience is going to understand, because if you don't give certain information, your audience may be confused. But at the same time, you don't want to give everything away. You want to have some kind of mystery or something that you're keeping back from the audience so that they have a reason to keep reading your comic, so that they want to know what the answer is to that question. Act 2 is the midpoint of your story, the middle of your story. It's when the protagonist should be trying to resolve the conflict. Your protagonist, your main character, is trying to resolve the problem, whatever that problem is. It could be a problem presented by the antagonist, the villain, whatever is standing in the way of the hero, the main character getting what they want. So your protagonist is trying to solve the problem, but in the middle, in the midpoint, there's often an obstacle that prevents the hero, the main character, from solving that problem. So this is when trials occur. It's when the main character has to prove themselves that they're worthy of reaching the end of their own story. So the protagonist might find themselves in a worsening situation. They keep coming against different barriers, different obstacles, and the protagonist doesn't have the skills necessary to solve the problem at this point. So in this second act, the protagonist needs to potentially learn something, whatever that something is, that helps them in the third act resolve the problem. So the protagonist doesn't have the skills yet to defeat the antagonist, whatever that antagonist is. The antagonist could be a person, another character. It could be a force of nature. It could be a societal problem. So Act 3, the end, this is when the climax happens. The climax is what everything else has been building up to. And after the climax, there should be a resolution, and you should get to that resolution relatively quickly. The climax is when the main problem of the story reaches its most intense moment. So there's perhaps a sense of danger, a sense of tension. Perhaps your audience is going to be on the edge of their seats, or they're going to be even more and more curious to know what the solution is. So you're going to have this really intense point, a standoff, something really shocking happens, and then that problem that you posed at the beginning of the story has to be resolved. This can be when the protagonist wins, but the protagonist doesn't always have to win. The protagonist can also lose, as long as this climax happens and there's some sort of resolution which could even be the death of the protagonist, or the protagonist might have to sacrifice themselves in order to resolve the problem. So the resolution is really your ending. It's when you're wrapping everything up. It's when the audience should finally know the solution to the problem, and the audience should have some sense of that problem having been solved. The audience should have some sort of satisfaction. They don't have to be 100% satisfied with the ending. There can be something about the story, about the climax and resolution that frustrates the audience, but you do want to give your audience a sense that it wasn't all for naught, that something was achieved through your story. So again, this is just another way to approach storytelling within your comic, graphic novel, or webcomic. Really, all you need is a beginning, middle, and end. So each event in your story should build upon the previous event until you reach that climax. So you're building up to that climax. Your climax is kind of the goal that you're trying to reach as a storyteller. And that's something that you should try to figure out probably early on. So I hope that this 3-act structure is a helpful idea to organizing your ideas, organizing your story, organizing your plot. Again, please go back to my outlining video because I discuss the same idea of beginning, middle, and end, but in a different lens through a different perspective. So if this 3-act structure is not helpful to you, hopefully the other ideas that I covered in my outlining video will be helpful to you in organizing your story and plot. Again, I really highly recommend getting your hands on a copy of The Hero with 1,000 Faces, as well as a copy of How to Write a Movie in 21 Days. These are kind of my storytelling Bibles that I return to over and over again, and they've helped me through the years figure out how to tell a story, how to improve my storytelling. So I think these 2 books might be really helpful for all of you out there. And if you want me to do more episodes about these 2 books, breaking these 2 books down into easier parts, then I'd be happy to make more episodes about these 2 books. Just let me know in the comments below. Do you have a question about making comics, about storytelling, about writing, about drawing, about self-publishing? Whatever questions you have about making comics, please let me know so that I can answer them in a future episode. Please send me your questions in the comments below, or tweet me your questions at GEGallas, that's GEGALLAS. I really look forward to receiving your questions, and I can't wait to answer them in a future episode. Do you want to support this channel? Please subscribe. It's free. It's one easy click below, and you'll get notified every time I post a new episode, which is every Tuesday and Thursday. That's all for now. See you next time.